The year is 1923. You are sitting in a cafe in Berlin. It is a crisp morning. You order a cup of coffee to start your day. The price listed on the chalkboard menu is 5,000 marks. It is expensive, shockingly expensive compared to last year. But you have the cash in your pocket, so you order it. You drink your coffee slowly, read the newspaper, scanning headlines about strikes, riots, and the collapsing government. You watch the people outside the window scurrying like ants, clutching bags tight against their chests. You enjoy 30 minutes of peace. Then, you ask for the bill. The waiter walks over looking exhausted. His apron is dirty, his eyes are hollow. He looks at you, then at the chalkboard, and says, "That will be 10,000 marks, please." You are confused. You laugh nervously. You point to the board where it says 5,000. The waiter doesn't laugh. He sighs, picks up a rag and wipes the price off the board right in front of your eyes. He writes a new number. 10,000, sir, he says. His voice devoid of emotion. The price of coffee has doubled since you sat down. If you wait another hour, it will be 20,000. This sounds like a nightmare. It sounds like a glitch in the simulation. But for millions of people in the Weimar Republic, this was not a dream. It was a terrifying reality. A reality where money lost its meaning entirely. A reality where a lifetime of hard work and savings could not buy a single loaf of bread. A reality where it was cheaper to burn banknotes in the stove for heat than to use them to buy firewood. We look back at history books and we see the pictures. We see the wheelbarrows full of cash, see the kids playing with money like it's trash, and we laugh. We think, how stupid were they? Why didn't they just stop printing? But here's the terrifying part. They weren't stupid. Germany was the most educated nation on earth. They had the best engineers, the greatest philosophers, and the smartest economists. And yet they walked open-eyed into an economic suicide pact. And today, if you look closely at the ledger of the modern world, you will see that we are walking down the exact same path. Welcome to the Economic Historian. Today, we aren't just talking about the past. We are looking at our own future.
Ow.
This is the story of the day money died. To understand the collapse, you have to understand the height from which they fell. Before World War I, Germany wasn't a banana republic. It was the industrial engine of Europe. It was the Silicon Valley and the Wall Street of its day rolled into one. It had a currency, the gold mark, that was as solid as the rock of Gibraltar. For decades, the exchange rate was steady. For marks equaled $1. People trusted the system. They saved money. They bought government bonds. They believed that if they worked hard, their future was secure. They believed the state was invincible. But in 1914, the world went to war, and wars are expensive. Germany made a fatal calculation. Like the British, who raised taxes to pay for their armies, the German Kaiser decided not to tax his people. He didn't want to upset them. Instead, he borrowed. He suspended the gold standard, the promise that paper money could be exchanged for gold, and turned on the printing presses. The logic was simple, arrogant, and dangerous. We will win the war quickly, and we will make the losers pay for it. The French and the British will pay our debts. It was a gamble, a bet on total victory, but they didn't win. In 1918, after 4 years of brutal trench warfare, Germany surrendered, and the bill came due. The Treaty of Versailles wasn't just a peace treaty, it was a financial death sentence. The Allies, led by a vengeful France, wanted to ensure Germany could never rise again. They stripped Germany of its colonies, they seized its iron and coal mines, and then they delivered the final blow, reparations. They demanded 132 billion gold marks. To give you an idea of how much money that was, it was more than all the gold reserves in Germany. In fact, it was more than all the gold in Europe. Germany was bankrupt. Its factories were seizing up. Its gold was gone. Its soldiers were returning home to unemployment, but the debt remained. So, the new democratic government, the Weimar Republic, faced an impossible choice. Option A: default on the debt, admit bankruptcy, and face a military invasion by France. Option B: raise taxes on a starving, angry population and risk a communist revolution. Or option C: the magic solution. The solution that politicians always choose when they run out of ideas. They chose the path of least resistance. They decided to print their way out of trouble. For a few years, the inflation was bad, but manageable. Life was hard, but society still functioned. But the tipping point, the moment the car drove off the cliff, came in January 1923. Germany fell behind on its payments. They couldn't send enough coal and timber to France. So, the French army invaded. They marched into the Ruhr Valley, Germany's industrial heartland. They occupied the steel mills and the coal mines. They intended to take the resources by force. The German government couldn't fight back with an army. They'd been disarmed. So they fought back with economics. They ordered a policy of passive resistance. They told the German workers in the Ruhr, do not work for the French. Go on strike. Stay home. We will still pay your wages. Think about that for a second. The government promised to pay the wages of millions of factory workers, miners, and railwaymen to do nothing. To produce nothing? Where did the money come from? The factories were closed. The coal wasn't being sold. There was no tax revenue. There was only one source left. This man, Rudolf Havenstein, the president of the central bank, became the conductor of the apocalypse. He ordered the printing presses to run 24 hours a day. When the government printing offices couldn't keep up, they hired private newspaper presses. They printed money on one side of the paper because it was faster and cheaper. They stopped checking for quality. They just needed quantity. The supply of money exploded. But the supply of goods, bread, coal, shoes, had collapsed because the Ruhr was shut down. Too much money chasing too few goods. It is the classic definition of inflation, but on a scale never seen before in human history. The numbers stopped making sense. The human brain struggles to comprehend exponential growth. In 1914, $1 bought 4 marks. By 1922, $1 bought 7,000 marks. By July 1923, $1 bought 160,000 marks. And then the dam broke. By November 1923, $1 was worth 4.2 trillion marks. But numbers on a chart don't tell the story. The story is in the velocity of money. In economics, velocity is how fast money changes hands. Usually you get paid, you keep the money for a week, maybe a month, then you spend it. In Weimar Germany, velocity became infinite. As soon as a worker was paid, he didn't walk, he ran to the nearest store. Wives would wait outside the factory gates with laundry baskets. Their husbands would throw bundles of cash into the baskets, and the wives would sprint to the market. Why? Because the price of a sausage might double in the time it took to walk from the factory to the butcher. If you held on to money for an hour, you lost wealth. If you held it overnight, you were destitute. This constant panic created a new medical condition. Doctors called it the zero stroke. People went insane trying to calculate the prices. A tram ticket cost billions. A loaf of bread cost hundreds of billions. People would stand in grocery stores, staring at the zeros on the price tags, unable to do the math, shaking uncontrollably until they collapsed. The psychological toll was devastating. The math of survival had become impossible. In every crisis, there are winners and losers. And inflation is the cruelest tax of all, because it targets the innocent. The biggest losers were the savers. The middle class, the backbone of society. Pensioners who had saved for 50 years found that their entire life savings couldn't buy a cup of tea. War widows living on government pensions starved to death because the checks they received were worthless paper. Universities closed because their endowments had evaporated. The values of thrift, hard work, and planning for the future were mocked by reality. The ant starved, while the grasshopper feasted. And then there were the winners. The inflation kings. Men like Hugo Stinnes. Stinnes was an industrialist who understood the game. He knew the currency was going to zero. So, he borrowed. He borrowed massive amounts of marks from the banks to buy real assets, coal mines, ships, hotels, newspapers. When the time came to pay back the loans, he paid them with worthless paper money. He effectively bought a substantial part of the German economy for free. Foreigners also lived like kings. If you had US dollars or British pounds, you could buy a castle in Berlin for $100. Students from America would come to Germany and live in luxury hotels, eating caviar and drinking champagne for pennies, while the Germans outside starved. This fueled a deep, burning resentment, hatred for the parasites, and the international financiers that would later be exploited by the darkest political forces. As Al-Ghazali warned us in our previous video, when money loses its soul, society rots. Weimar Germany proved him right. When money dies, trust dies. And when trust dies, society breaks down. Farmers refused to sell food to the cities. They let crops rot in the fields rather than exchange them for paper. Starving mobs from the city would march into the countryside to steal potatoes. Crime became a survival strategy. Prostitution skyrocketed as mothers sold themselves to feed their children. And in this chaos, in this vacuum of hope, the people started looking for a savior. They lost faith in democracy. They lost faith in the system. Started looking for a strong man, someone who would promise order, someone who would punish the traitors. It is no coincidence that the beer hall putsch, Adolf Hitler's first attempt to seize power by force, happened in November 1923, the exact peak of the hyperinflation. Although he failed that day, the lesson was learned. The death of money had paved the road for the death of freedom. The middle class, radicalized by the loss of their savings, became the base of the Nazi Party. Now you might be thinking that was 100 years ago, that was Germany. They lost a war. That can't happen here. That can't happen to the dollar. You sure? Look at the ledger. The United States is currently $34 trillion in debt. Just like Weimar Germany, the debt is growing faster than the economy. Just like Weimar Germany, the government is spending money it doesn't have on wars, on welfare, on bailouts. It's just like Weimar Germany. When they run out of money, they don't cut spending. They don't raise taxes. They print. In 2020 alone, the United States printed nearly 40% of all dollars in existence. They told us inflation was transitory. They told us it was under control. But ask yourself, does your grocery bill feel under control? Does the price of housing feel under control? Does the price of gas feel under control? We are seeing the early symptoms of the same disease. The debasement of currency isn't an accident. It is a policy. It is the only way governments know how to deal with debt they cannot pay. They inflate it away. They steal value from your savings to pay for their mistakes. They transfer wealth from the poor and the middle class to the asset holders and the debtors. The German mark didn't die in a day. It died slowly, then all at once. First it was ignored, then it was denied, then it was managed. And finally, it was panic. We are currently in the denial phase. History is a circle. The names change, the currencies change. But the laws of economics do not change. You cannot print wealth. You can only print receipts for wealth. When you print too many receipts, the fraud is eventually revealed. The people of 1923 Germany didn't believe their money could die. They thought it was impossible, till it happened. Do not make the same mistake. Real wealth is not paper. Real wealth is what the paper buys. Own assets. Own truth. And never ever trust a printer with your future. I am the economic historian. Subscribe and remove the blindfold.